Okay, well, I'm here with Rupert Scott tonight. I'm going to have a chat with Roo, first of all, about his kind of volleyball career. So, welcome, Roo. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, we first met, God, like you were, I think you were 11 when we first got together. And I was probably, if not the first person to throw a volleyball in front of you, the second. So you've had a long volleyball career for somebody. What are you, 27 now?
27, yeah.
So you've actually had a pretty intensive volleyball experience for about 16 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's one when you, because obviously we hadn't seen each other in a while, and people constantly ask me the question, kind of like, when did you start playing volleyball? And I was like, I don't actually remember. And that's when you said to me a couple of weeks ago that it was, I was pretty much 11 years old, and I suddenly thought, oh wow, I've been playing volleyball for 16 years. 16 years of my life has been surrounded by just volleyball constantly. There was obviously a little break in the middle, but yeah, no, it's been an intense part of my life, but also some of it's taken me to unbelievable places and things. Pretty much due to you. Oh, well, I wouldn't have had that ability to do any of that as well.
Well, that's overly generous of you. I think we came together whenever that was. I don't know, gosh, 2004, 2005. It was perfect time because I'd really started getting into my coaching.
Yeah.
And I had time. Part of my life when I had time. And you came through in a group of lads. I think we had, when you started in year 7, we had about 15, 20 boys all playing and all really interested.
Yeah.
And that really helped to kind of push things on. But I have to say, like, what I try and do as a coach now is I try not to pigeonhole people in certain positions. Yeah. And I was massively guilty of doing that with you right from the start because you had massive hands. And that's one of the things I can really remember is you grabbing a volleyball and just like your hand, you're in year 7, your hands just stretched right around the ball, like, dead easy.
Yeah. Well, that's things I'm glad you did pigeonhole me in that or put me in that box early on, because to be honest, physically, I probably wouldn't have made it anywhere else. So it was one of those things where it might have been a bit of luck, but also it worked out really well for me. And it's also something that I enjoyed, being someone that is not the most physical of people. I don't jump particularly high. I don't have particularly long arms or anything like that. Being a setter was kind of like the prime position, because especially the way the game's going now, I'd never made it as an outside, definitely never as a middle. So like it was kind of perfect. But also that's one thing I do always remember is that I can always remember going away to England camps and stuff like that and seeing people at Boswell, seeing people at Wessex being told, this is what you do, this is what you are, this is what you are, this is how we do it, and there's no other way of doing it. Yeah. And that was something that I always, even when we had like the summer camps and stuff like that, watching just like videos of Jiba, watching all that kind of stuff and being like, right, we want you to do the basics correctly, but within that, it kind of like express yourself, like be you, which is really rare in this country. And actually, to be honest, it's rare everywhere I've ever played volleyball. It's always kind of like you do it this way or leave.
Well, that's really because we'll talk a lot more about setting in the other conversation we're going to have, because I have certain principles I always want a young setter to be able to get into their head.
Yeah.
But I firmly believe that I'm coaching, when I'm doing coaching, particularly with younger ones, I'm coaching a person, not a position. And so really, unless you invest in getting to know who the people are, you can't really go for it. And I guess, when you were a junior, you came through in a group where I came and helped out at an England camp one summer at High Peaks.
I remember that.
And there was 4 setters at the England camp, and 3 of them were lads who I was coaching at Staffs, because Jenks had come to play for us. I can't take any credit for Jenks whatsoever. But there was you and Alex Liebeck. Yeah. And you two were such different setters in the way that you played the game. You and I, I found it really interesting. So
and that's it. It's becoming. That's why, for one, me and Simon Loftus haven't always had the greatest of relationships. Yeah. But that's why he's someone in the game at the moment in England who was really trying to push individuality, which is not common. And it's something that I always, the one way I explain it is kind of like, if an English player had gone and done what Inga Peth had done, where he went to go and hit the pipe and set it or something like that, someone would go to him like, no, you can't do that. That's not how you play volleyball. And it's something that I feel like if we tried it with you, you might have been like, go for it, like try it.
Yeah.
And I think that's massive for English volleyball. It's kind of like everything's been so one way, or it's wrong.
And is that Roo, you've worked with all the best coaches in England, no doubt about it, and some of the less good ones as well. And is that because they all learned in the same way? Is that because they're all mates? Is that what's behind that?
I don't know if it's because I don't know if it's because we're so far behind in volleyball in general that we kind of limit ourselves.
Yeah.
So we think, right, we as coaches maybe can only allow players to get to the basic level, instead of being like, we've got some good coaches out there. And like, some of the best coaches I've ever had have been in England. I've been in the US, been in Germany, and I've had some dreadful coaches, some people that have just been there like, what's going on here? And I think we sometimes limit ourselves to not just as a coach, but limit what we think our players can achieve as well.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. I always remember you and Craig going away to that Euro volley tournament, or whatever. We didn't quite reach the heights that you expect us, but you saying like, we saw these kids doing this stuff. Like we think you could do it, instead of being like, everywhere else is probably, oh, well, we'll try and compete. Like you expected us to be, like you gave us the drive to be as good as we possibly could.
Well, so on that, so that was the Euro volley. I think we went twice. I only went once because I became a dad in between the two, and some things get in the way of coaching. But that was after your under 17 season and your under 18 season. So the notes I've written down, like you were captain of a team that won the national under 15s, under 16s, and then the under 18s twice. Like that is really unique. But there's one other person I know who's done that, and that's Coops.
How is it?
Cooper, yeah. So, you can imagine.
I was going to keep my mouth shut about that.
Yeah, but you're in really limited. I mean, people might have done it since. I've been less close to the junior stuff really since a couple of years after you finished. I think I took Rich James's year group through all the way. But we went off to Euro volley and we took on teams from all round different countries in Europe, and did okay. I think we won 2 games in that first tournament. I think we beat the Albanian team twice, and I think we beat the Portuguese team.
Yeah, beat Benfica, and their setter, we follow each other on Instagram. Yeah. And he's now starting setter for Lubin in Poland.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. Because they were not a fantastic team.
No.
I think other English teams, that was the first. So we'd beat Wessex at Crystal Palace in the final that year. Sean Cook played for Wessex.
Yeah, he did.
That Wessex team probably would have beaten Benfica as well.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. But I think that's the thing, is where probably none of those other players on the team, on that Benfica team, probably went anywhere. But he was a good player who was then put into a professional system at a young age. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing in this country, is that obviously you can get so far here. Yeah. But because of the general standard of the game throughout the entire country, it's difficult to challenge yourself. Like you look at people like throughout the years, like we've had a lot of good young English players who have then suddenly just dropped off.
So what's the age, Roo, where it needs to change? Because I don't disagree, and it's something I've always thought about in the context of our club and the national junior setup. Is when we went to that tournament in Italy and we were sat in where the food was, and you had all these giants like wandering around. I was like, how do I get me some of them? Yeah. But I also, when we were playing, there wasn't many of them that were better volleyball players than you guys. No. But you could see they were going to get stronger, and obviously they were bigger. Yeah. But what age group did you, because you played for cadets and juniors, what age group was it that you felt, oh God, these guys are now pulling away from me?
So, because I remember we went to a cadets Nevza. Yeah. And we hadn't been, a lot of us hadn't been playing a huge amount of time. But I felt like we weren't too far away from that. Apart from Finland were quite a way ahead, but the Swedes and the Danish, we weren't too far away from them. And then suddenly I remember going back the next year and just being like, playing the same players, and they'd all changed. Wow. And it's because from the age of 15 to 16, they'd all gone away to full-time volleyball schools. Yeah. And that was massive. We did it the year later. Okay. And that's why we then became capable of kind of competing with some more of those teams. I think the biggest issue was with our squad then was not believing in ourselves that we could actually go and win games. But it was definitely that 15 to 16 when it went from us training still probably once or twice a week to them training twice a day, becoming physically stronger, and the main thing, mentally stronger.
Yeah.
Like, we were mentally strong in England. Like, I always felt unbeatable in England. Yeah. As soon as we went away, we were like, okay, we're good, but are we that good? Kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So when you went, you were really lucky in some ways in that, like the stars aligned. You had a really good group of people coming through. You had a young, enthusiastic coach in me who put a lot of time in.
Yeah.
And then I dragged Craig Hanford in to start coaching with me because, dead selfishly, I wanted to become a better coach.
Yeah.
So I found someone who could make me a better coach.
Yeah.
Basically. And then he took his experience of the potential, really, of you guys and what he could see in our club and go, I think we can do something with the pathway. And that's how he started putting the building blocks in place to create the academy at Loughborough.
Yeah.
And
which is the greatest travesty in English volleyball is that people didn't support that.
Right. Go on then.
It was perfect. It was literally, it couldn't have been, obviously there were things that needed to be changed and not everything inside it went 100% how we expected it to. Yeah. But if you would put teams in, if people like the Boswells lot, the Wessex lot had said, right, yeah, we support this, we want our kids to go here, instead of being selfish and keeping them, then the English volleyball as a whole would be so much better. Like, you look at our age group then, the way players developed, like Jenks professional, Shentz professional, me semi-professional, all of these players went off and did great things.
Yeah, and we like even Ian McKellar, who was a last-minute addition to it after our Euro volley experience, went off to Hawaii.
Exactly. So it was one of those things where I look back and think, whoever was in charge of Volleyball England at that time and let it go to waste was foolish. Because it was such a good setup. Yeah. I think that obviously, again, the things are never going to be perfect, but it should have been like it is in Sweden, like it is in those places, whose volleyball is developing year on year. You look at the Swedish league, it keeps on getting better. The Swedish national team keeps on getting better. And they say, if you want to play for the Swedish national team as a junior, you go to the volleyball school. Yeah. If you don't,
forget it.
Don't bother.
Bit like, I guess, the England rugby team saying, if you want to play for England, you've got to play in England.
Yeah.
Set some expectations.
Yeah.
It is interesting because around that time, there was lots going on at that time. And, it's a long time ago and lots happened in my life since then. But, we did things like we went off to Rotterdam so I saw Nepeth play when he was 16, 17.
Yeah, I remember you bringing videos back of him.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, look at this guy.
Yeah.
But like, for me, that was really inspirational. We taught coaching. I think we were over there for about 4 days. Yeah. We taught coaching. We taught tactics. The Belgian or the Dutch, I can't remember which one, but the Belgian Dutch girls played, I think, in the final.
Yeah.
And we watched them train on their morning session on the day of the final and saw all those kind of things. And for me as a coach, it really filled my head with loads of different ideas. But it's really interesting for you to talk about getting physically and mentally tougher by being away from home.
Yeah.
Going into that place.
Yeah, because that's the thing. So I remember going away, moving with people like Chris Ashton, who's another Newcastle lad, and getting into our halls and him saying, which one's the oven? And just thinking, oh God, what have we let ourselves in for here? Like, this is going to be an absolute nightmare. My dad driving him home and he didn't know where he lived, things like that. So there was lots of like worrying things, but also I think even he will probably admit, I don't know what he's doing now, but things like that helped him grow as a person, like massively. And that's the big thing, is it's like, even if people didn't make it as a volleyball player or get to where they wanted to be as a volleyball player, it helped make everybody as a person. We had to deal with looking after ourselves, cooking for ourselves, doing our own washing, going to school, managing a busy schedule at like 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
Like Shent was probably 16 when he went, I think.
Yeah, he was.
He was an idiot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Legitimately, if you look at him now.
Yeah.
And he's a grown up. He's an adult. And
he got in. What's really interesting, what I vividly remember with Shent, because you're right, he was a bit of an idiot, and I'll speak to him in a couple of weeks, and I'm sure we'll have that part of the conversation. But something really clicked with him a little bit before he went to Loughborough, and he made a decision he wanted to be a volleyball player. And I remember talking to him because I think he went in with some injuries, but he was so focused on the fitness stuff. Because you had Craig and Keith. Keith was travelling up and down from Sheffield to do sessions with you guys.
I think for the first 6 months, something like that.
Yeah, and you couldn't really have asked for two better coaches actually for that groundwork in stuff. So yeah, I think really fascinating. But then, like, you went off to Sheffield for a bit. I'm going to brush over that because I had to play against you at those times. We might come back to it because I'm a huge fan of Keith's technical coaching. Like, I think he's an absolute genius, and we'll dig under a little bit on that, Roo. But you went off to the USA, and you've just talked about how brilliant things were in Loughborough, but not perfect. But also how it built character. And, you know, you went off to the States with high hopes and it didn't really go to plan.
No, it didn't at all.
So share with us what you went through in that.
So I was kind of like and ahhing about my volleyball career. And I kind of knew that in hindsight, it might not have been the greatest idea, but I knew that I needed to be out of England. I couldn't be in England. If I was going to develop as a volleyball player how I wanted to, England was not the place for me to do it. Happened to be that season in England, the league was probably the best it's ever been. So Dammy was there, Joel Miller was there, and the standard was really high, and it will probably not get back to that level for a long time. So I went off, kind of like taking a big risk. I went to a junior college to start off with because I hadn't done my SATs. So to get into a 4-year college, you have to have done your SATs. I hadn't done them because I didn't plan on going out. I didn't plan on going to America until I actually moved into my university halls in Sheffield, and I'd gone to my first day of lectures. Wow. And I sat there and someone said, "So has anyone got questions?" And I was like, "I'm going to move to America. How do I go about this?" So it was a big risk, and it was something that, because it not being a big school, it was something that a lot of people were like, "I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I don't think you should be doing that." But I thought, do you know what? If I don't do it now, then I'm never going to get the chance again. And I looked at it as, because a lot of times you go to a 4-year university and you probably won't play your first 2 years. Yeah. You'll sit on the bench, you'll train, and you won't actually do anything. And then the last 2 years is normally, obviously you get the anomalies, you get the TJ DeFalcos and stuff like that who play the entire way. Yeah. A lot of the times you end up playing 2 years, maybe even 1 year, which I didn't want to do. Yeah. So I went to this JC, and honestly, it was probably the best setup, better than the 4-year college that I went to after, that I've ever seen. We had a coach that I put on, like, out of my two coaches that I was most successful with and most enjoyed him were you and Jonathan Charette. Okay. He was very different to you, but also similar at the same time. It was weird. Okay. He was very, very driven, very like loved having people, like being on time was important. All this it's kind of like military, like what you expect in the US. Yeah. But created a really great relationship with him, and he was a phenomenal player. 6 foot barely, touched like 3.65 meters, left-handed opposite, just an animal. Yeah. And he was someone that he just loved winning, and that's what the same as you, like. Yeah. And that's what always came through to me. He was like, that's the thing that reminded me of you, was that all he wanted to do in the whole scheme of things was win. And that's massive. Like, and then to instill that into somebody is difficult. And so I went there, and the physiotherapy stuff, like, I was in the physio every day if I wanted to be. I had S&C every day. We had our own training hall. It was brilliant. It was better than there's probably anything in England. The standard of volleyball was good. It wasn't NCAA standard, but it was better than just training every day. Yeah. So the standard, a lot of the standard was high, and a lot of those players who played at that level were kids who were either really bad at school, or didn't have the money. Right. Okay. So a lot of these kids, there was a lot of kids from Compton, those kind of areas who couldn't afford to go to a 4-year school yet. So kind of just went to a JC, got themselves a scholarship after, then moved on to a 4-year. So the standard was really good. And it was just somewhere that you didn't get the luxury of a 4-year. 4-year university is quite luxurious. I'm sure Ian will have told people, like, living in Hawaii, he got whatever he wanted. It was like, I need this.
I need to speak to Ian actually about that.
Yeah, it was the differences between Hawaii and where I was in Long Beach were massive. But I think it taught me to kind of appreciate when I moved on, appreciate absolutely everything I got. Because these people worked so hard, and they cared so much about something that they weren't getting paid a huge amount of money for. Whereas you go to a lot of top colleges, and a lot of the coaches and stuff like that are getting paid huge sums of money, and they're kind of settled in their jobs, and a lot of them aren't very good, which I found out after having 2 successful years at a junior college. getting voted like best setter in junior college volleyball and stuff like that, playing the best volleyball I'd ever played. And it was that kind of thing. The same coach was, you're a wonderful player. I don't care what you do. Just go and win us a game. He's like, so it's kind of like he said to me in one game, he's like, right, you're the only one winning points. Every time you get the ball, dump. And I won 19 points in a game. And he's like, just keep on doing it until someone stops you. Whereas if I'd done that anywhere else, someone would have been like, right, stop doing that, set the ball somewhere else. He was like, I don't care where you set the ball. Yeah,
point's a point.
Yeah. So that was something that I learned with him. But then obviously,
you know who taught me that though? You'll be surprised by this. The coach who I had when I played for English Unis training sessions was Lenny Barry.
Was it?
It was Lenny. He just said, it was when I was in my third year, I think, at uni.
Yeah.
And he was just like, just win the point.
Yeah.
Win the point.
Yeah. And that's what you look at. That's why you look at like the French team and stuff now. Yeah. They're very much like that.
Yeah. Well, like, go with the stats.
Yeah. Tanuti, the amount of times he just volleys the ball over, or the Iranian, like there's so many times where it's like
he's a different matter though, isn't he?
Yeah. But it's that thing about like, we don't care how you win a point, just win it.
So what happened? So you left the junior college,
and then I went off to a place called Cal State Northridge, which is a mid-level Division 1 team. Because I kind of knew I got some offers from better teams, but I also knew that if I'd gone there, so Long Beach State I'd spoken to, but then they were also recruiting a young lad called Josh Tuaniga at that time, and I watched him play, and I was like, he's going to be one of the best setters in the world. I should not go to Long Beach State because I'm not going to step on court. So I went off to this place called Cal State Northridge, which was mid-table, decent team, could always throw out an upset. And I went there, and after about 6 weeks of training, getting myself in the starting setter position in a team that we just signed some really, really good young freshmen. We signed a brilliant Bulgarian lad. And you were looking at the team thinking, actually, do you know what? We were the only team that was playing a quick tempo. Okay. So, because a lot of American setters are taught just to set like high and low people wing. And I came in and they were like, right, we want you to play a shoot ball to the wing. And we were going into practice matches and destroying teams just through our speed. And after about 6 weeks, I think it must have been, I was sat there in training, getting ready to warm up. And this admin guy came in, who was kind of like the dean of sports or whatever, came in and said, "Oh, Rupert, just need to have a quick chat with you." I was like, okay. He's like, right, we'll go into my office. Sat down in this office, and I was like, what the hell's going on here? Like, this is weird. And he said, we've had a message from the NCAA, and we just needed to inform you that you've been banned from playing volleyball. I was like,
what?
Like, what have I done wrong? And it was kind of like, I didn't know what to think. I think it was one of the first times in many years since like my granddad died. I was just like, I just like broke down. I was like, like scholarship gone, playing volleyball gone. Because that thing is, in America, if you don't train with the team, you don't have anything to do. There's no club volleyball really.
Wow.
There's nothing there. So it was one of those things where I sat there. I was just like, no, this can't be right. So we appealed it. The school got me a lawyer, and kind of like a lawyer that I never would have been able to afford. And I got into this meeting with him, sat me down. He said, "Rupert, mate, we stand no chance of winning this." He's like, "We could fight it." He's like, "It'll take us years. By that time, you will have graduated." He's like, "It'll cost us millions of dollars." And he's like, "The NCAA will win in the whole scheme of things because..."
Why were you banned? What was the reason?
So the reasoning why was, as an NCAA player, you're not allowed to have been a professional athlete. Yeah. This doesn't mean that you were paid. It could mean that you received literally a pair. I think it was LeBron James received a pair of Nike shoes, which then meant that he wasn't allowed to be an NCAA athlete. This was after I had graduated from high school. Say graduated, but left high school. Yeah. As soon as you've left high school, any volleyball you play outside of that counts as an eligibility.
Wow.
So after I had left Loughborough, and then played half a season for Sheffield, half a season for Newcastle as an outside.
Yeah, you were playing outside. We were in the second division. Yeah,
and that half a year cost me 2 years. That half year cost me 2.5 years of eligibility.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and I was just like, and I even remember going to Volleyball England and message them just saying, right, they're going to come to you and ask for like proof that I played in games.
Yeah.
you don't have to give them that proof. You can just say, we don't have proof of what games you played in, or you can give them the information. I will get banned if you give them the information for very little. Or you could just say, sorry, we don't store information after previous year. And they gave them the information straight away and they banned me. So, which I do understand from a Volleyball England point of view. They had to be truthful about it. I was hoping they were going to do me a favour, but they didn't. So yeah, and it meant that I was there pretty much a year and a half through my degree, my 4-year degree. And I was like, couldn't play volleyball, couldn't train anymore. And I just had no direction. I was lost scholarship opportunities, lost everything pretty much. And I was just sat there. I remember sat there just thinking, right, what the hell do I do now? Do I quit? Do I come home to England? Do I just carry on with my degree? Like, I loved my life in the US. Like, it was phenomenal. So it was the toughest decision I've ever made. And I kind of sat there and thought, well, maybe this is volleyball over for me then. Like, this could be it. And I did kind of think of that at that point. I was like, I'll play volleyball again, but never like this. And it actually ended up being nearly 4 years of not playing volleyball. So I always think about 16 years of playing volleyball. Actually, 4 of those were in the time when I was probably playing my best volleyball. And I still look at it. If I played in that NCAA season, the contract that I could have got out of that playing as an NCAA, there's players that I played with who I know I was better than, and I was outperforming, who are now playing for top teams in France, Italy, Germany. And that 4 years put me back. Probably, I don't think I ever got back to the standard ever close.
It's an interesting one, and one thing you can't do is live in the past.
No, absolutely.
And I don't think you are, and I think in many ways you've moved yourself forward in the last 12 months or so, a significant way. But you did finish stuff up in the States, and then you came back. When you came back, we taught a little bit in that time. I can remember you saying you were playing a bit of footy. You were thinking of trying to hand your hand at the beach, all those kind of things, and clearly kind of you're a bit lost.
Oh, absolutely.
Essentially. But you came back and ended up going up to Northumbria to do a master's.
I did. Well, yeah. So it was supposed to be anyway. So I came back and I was thinking, right, I need to do something, but what am I going to do? And it was actually my dad. I had a really tough conversation with my dad, kind of saying, right, I'm just going to quit volleyball. I'm not going to consider going back. I'm just going to get on with life and find an office job or something like that. And he sat me down. He was like, no, you're not doing that. He's like, I remember taking you to work. He works as a financial accounting kind of guy. And he sat me down. He was just like, it was pretty emotional talk, but he's like, you said you never wanted to do a job like that. He's like, so why are you settling? Like, just go back and at least give it a go. And after him persuading me, I got in contact with Dave at Northumbria and said, right, give it this one shot. At least if it's a year of a master's, then it can kind of make or break kind of thing. Like if I put it all in and get myself back to a level, then I think I'll be all right. So I went up to Northumbria for the first 6 months because I hadn't applied for a degree yet. So I just lived there, did some work and trained. It was pretty miserable because I remember the first time going to a session and Dave being like, right, just go and do some setting in the hoop. I couldn't volley the ball above the height of the net. It was the first, because that thing is, when I was in America, I literally hadn't touched it because I kind of I wanted to keep myself away from it because it was a little bit depressing, really seeing my mates do it. So I didn't touch a ball in years. And I got there and someone threw the ball at me. I was just like, don't remember what to do. And the first ball I set, I think went under the net pretty much. I was like, this could take a while. And it was a process, and it didn't get any better for pretty much 4 or 5 months. I didn't really have Dave didn't really trust me, which was understandable. But also didn't really give me the opportunity to get better because I needed game time. I needed to be put in at the deep end instead of just doing someone throwing a ball at me and setting to
Well, you're a competitor, and that's why you enjoyed having coaches like me and the guy at the junior college, because you're the same. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's what I didn't get that. I was just turning up to training and not particularly enjoying it, because we were a successful team as well. It was a damn good team, and we had people like Bradders in there who was killing it, and we had a lot of good Americans and things. It was a really, really good team, and it was only a week before cup final, and our setter, who had set every game until then, broke his hand. And Dave was like, oh gosh, like this is bad.
Yeah.
So the first game I started in 4 years was the Bologna versus Northumbria Cup final.
Yeah.
I set to a goal. I was just like, oh, I have no idea how this is going to go. Like, in my head, I was thinking to myself, because the training session the night before went so badly. It was one of those like just nightmares.
That's always a good sign, I think.
Yeah, no, they always were awful before our cup finals. Yeah. So I went into it and just thought, right, well, I've got nothing to lose here. I'm not expected to be any good. And I played really well. And we won 3-0.
Yeah.
Absolutely demolished them. And I just remember thinking, well, actually, maybe I can get this back. Yeah. I still didn't feel comfortable before I stopped playing. I felt like everything I did was kind of mindless. I just kind of went about it and it happened. Whereas now every single thing I did, I had to think about, which was tough. It was mentally exhausting. I come off after games being like, wow, I'm tired after that. Whereas I never really thought that before. But
that's probably a good sign though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I could have had the mixture of it being effortless, but also having to thinking about it at the same time, probably would have been better. Because I was thinking about things like where my feet were going, because my feet didn't seem to move like they used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously we won that, and then a couple of weeks later we played in the Super 8s finals, and the other setter had come back. He started. We went 1-0 down, and I think it was like 18-8 down or something like that in the second set.
Yeah.
Brought me and Nathan Fullerton on, and we came back and destroyed him.
Absolutely. I watched it.
Play volleyball again.
It was on the red button, I think, on the BBC.
Yeah, it was. And I also pulled out the set of the season that if it had been seen, like dig set to the middle, and no one said anything about it on the BBC. I was just like, this is like World League level, but no one said anything. So I got a load of confidence from that. And then obviously Northumbria pulled all their funding.
Yeah. So you went to Bologna.
Yeah, I went to Bologna. Simon Loftus called me and just said, right, we're trying to set up pretty much an English program here. We want you to be down here. Didn't turn out quite as we were expecting. There's lots of great stuff at Bologna, and they're doing some wonderful things to try and improve the sport. There's also some things that need improving, the basics mainly. So they're very good at getting a Jeeba in, getting to Champions League. The stuff they do is you look at it, you think, how has that happened?
Yeah.
But also there's certain things that need to be changed there to make it really successful, because it will be eventually.
Yeah, I've no doubt about it. I think it's a top job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got full respect for him. But obviously me and Mr. Loftus didn't always see eye to eye that year.
Yeah.
It was a tough year, a year that I was expecting to go slightly better than it did.
Yeah.
But it was also one, again, that it made me grow personally.
Yeah. I mean, I coached against you that season. I'd say the combination that you and Sean got together, I mean, you've known each other for a long time. We've mentioned Sean from when you guys were 17, and he is a top talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tough guy, phenomenal athlete. But the combination you two guys had and the timing link, it was very natural. And I think it took me back to painfully being against you. Like some of the stuff I think you started to get to when you were in your second under 18s year with like Shentz, particularly, and Bradders had only just started playing at that point.
Yeah, that's scary.
So, I think I know you had a challenging year at Bologna, and we talked about that a little bit. But I think the speed you were playing, particularly down the middle of the court, Sean out the back row, was frightening.
Yeah,
impossible to handle.
Yeah, and especially the way he contacts the ball as well. He's such a spring. He's terrible. He is the best British player we have. Yeah. As a natural talent.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree as a natural. Yeah. I mean,
and I think there's lots of stuff that he could improve on. But if you look at his career path, I'd say the best British player. He's the best British player I've played with, and that's not saying I've played with Bradders, who's obviously another damn good player. I've played with Matt Howe. I've played with Joel Mill. I've played with lots of good players. But just as a natural player, the way he moves around and things like that is just it's out of this world.
Yeah, and he's got it in the head as well. He's tough as you like. So you did Bologna, and I've known you for long. I've known you since you were a kid. And so I was looking at you going, oh, interesting. I was always hanging out. Maybe he'll just come and live at his parents again for a year. And I think we were messaging, and you said you'd got something in Germany, but again, it was like a few days before you went over.
Yeah, well, so Bologna had tried to push to re-sign me for the next year.
Right.
Little did I know they'd also sacked Lofty. So it might have been, maybe me and Lofty have a good relationship at England, but maybe seeing each other every day was not quite the right thing for us. So it might have been that being at Bologna the next year might have been a good idea, with a different kind of setup.
That was Vangelis, wasn't it, coaching?
Yeah. So it might have been that we had a different relationship. But yeah, so Bologna had pushed to try and re-sign me, but just life in London was a bit hectic, a bit too much for me. I didn't particularly like London as a city. So I thought, right, if I'm gonna go pro, this is the chance to do it. This is kind of like maybe the only chance I'll have. Yeah. And I'd been contacted by a coach halfway through my season at Bologna and said, come and sign for us. We need a setter for the second half of the season. And I said, nah, I'm going to stick with Bologna, get through the season, which I did. And it would have been difficult because I would have had to move my dog halfway through the season as well, which was a nightmare. So after that, I kind of was like, right, well, this is the chance to go for it. So I went out there and drove me and my dog out there to this beautiful city, absolutely phenomenal, like right on the edge of the Black Forest, Switzerland, 15 minutes drive away kind of thing, just absolutely phenomenal. The training hall that we had a view over through the Black Forest, this massive window, big view over the Black Forest, and then a stream down the middle that you went for an ice bath in after. Just the whole thing, it was beautiful. And they were like, oh yeah, this is just our crappy training hall. They took us to the game hall, like big video screens, stands. And it was amazing. Unbelievable, absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. However, they'd been relatively unsuccessful for quite a few seasons now. So the coach who I had there, I knew from Sheffield. So he had come over to Sheffield for a year, got a lot from Keith, and took a lot of that with him to Germany. Yeah. And we kind of started the season with a really young team. Average age, I think, was about 19 in an adults league.
Wow.
But I'm talking about these 19-year-olds were immense
athletes,
just phenomenal. Like you put them in the English Super 8s and they'd be the best players.
Okay.
Like really, really top class players. But with confidence as low as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
So I remember going into the first game and them saying, this is a team that we have to beat. Like they're useless. Like we should always beat these. And we lost 3-2. We had this big opposite, 7 foot, really uncoordinated. And he won us the first 2 sets and pretty much single-handedly lost us the last 3 sets. But he's just he's 19 years old. And he just had, like, it was one of those things. And they came out, that's the worst loss we've ever had. But that team went on to win the league.
Oh, great.
The next
was a bit challenging, eh?
Yeah, the next team, we need to be beating this team. Lost 3-2 to them. They finished second. And it was 3 games in a row. They were like, these are must-win games. We don't win them, we're useless.
Yeah.
Lost all 3-2. All 3 of those teams finished first, second, and third. And they were brilliant teams. They were really good teams. Like, again, if you put them in the English league, they dominate.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing was each team had an ex-Division 1 player who had unbelievable experience and was just consistent.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where after 3 games, all faith was lost. Everything had to change. We'd spent 3 months preparing to play a system, and that system was out the window. Right. And it was kind of like, there's out of that team last year, players who had been recruited to go and play Bundesliga 1 quit volleyball this season because of it was a mentally brutal season for a lot of people.
Sounds like it wasn't managed. Like, was it quite an inexperienced back office team, or? Yeah,
it was, and it was a very emotional back office team, one that couldn't distinguish between a logical decision and an emotional decision.
Yeah,
there were times where every game we'd end up with a couple of yellow cards and a red card, and it was because of a refereeing decision, which then led to influencing 19-year-olds not concentrating. You lose 5 points in a row, and it was that throughout the entire year. And once you get into that cycle, it's unbelievably difficult to get out of it.
Definitely.
You go to a training and everyone's down, and you're training every day, so it starts to get depressing. The German winter comes, so it gets cold, so everyone's a bit more miserable.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where it was something that could have been really good.
Yeah.
Recruitment maybe wasn't quite where it needed to be. And generally, I appreciate the time I was there. It wasn't what I wanted. And it didn't help that I had serious knee injuries throughout the year. And they weren't handled particularly well either. But that's also part of professional sport. And a lot of these clubs don't have the Premier League setups where you can be in a physio constantly and have all this. It was one of those things where we had a physio, but it was pretty much manage yourself and make sure you're not doing too much, things like that. And then if it got really bad, you can have a cortisone injection, which I was like, not doing that. Don't need to be doing that. So it was a tough year. A lot of people have said kind of like, oh, have you stopped playing volleyball? And for a while, I thought, yeah, I think maybe I have. But I think it'll be one of those things that it's kind of impossible to stop.
Yeah. Well, it'll be your own decision. It'll be your own decision. And I'm conscious we're still recording this conversation. We're getting immensely personal on these kind of things now, Roo. But, you know, it only matters for you.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
It doesn't matter for anyone. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
Yeah.
So my perspective, having peppered with you when we were allowed to do crazy things like pepper the other week, if your shoulder's still there, you still set with immense control of the ball for someone who's not done much volleyball. So, you know, whether you want to just play for fun, which for you could achieve in the English Super League for sure. Yeah. You know, my view, I'm always ambitious and all those kind of things for all of you guys.
Yeah.
You could challenge yourself to do it again, but it's whether you put yourself through it or not.
That's what there's been several nights where I've kind of just sat in bed, especially during COVID, where I was unfortunately working on a night shift at Morrison's, just thinking like, I can't be doing this. Luckily, I've got myself a job that I enjoy at the moment.
Yeah.
But there was a good period of time where I was kind of thinking, have I made the right decision here? And I think I have at the moment. Yeah. But again, there is that thing about like, I do believe in my own ability, and I always will do.
Yeah.
And I never always say never say never.
That's a healthy approach, and I do think, you know, you'd signed yourself up to come and play for us again this season. Yeah. And as it turned out, we're not going to have a National League season, although there is a nice bit of chat amongst the coach at the moment about doing an informal season when we're allowed to play again, which I've said obviously we're all up for.
Yeah.
But I've seen from you and from some other people I won't name because it's not fair on them, the intensity that you challenge yourselves to. And this conversation has been, you've got to the top of the game in England and you've tried to push for more, but there's no guidebook about how to push for more.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's a few of you guys who burn yourselves out. And I do think a little bit of, you know, you describe those amazing training halls, and when you get back into the reality of Madeley and the dirty floor, kind of grounds you a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And kind of recuperates. So, you know, we'll finish this conversation very shortly, but for me, I think you are, you've been very generous about Sean. I think you're right, but you should recognise the immense talent that you have and have had, and the unique achievements you've had through your volleyball as well. And, you know, I found it very easy to coach you because I kind of felt first time I coached you, I was like, this kid could play for England. And I have no doubt that will be the case. So it's been really, really helpful, like for me to listen to a little bit more about your volleyball career and for other people, because it doesn't always go easy. Yeah,
no. And that's it. Generally, I look at kind of like the majority of my kind of age group, not a sob story, but I kind of had the pathway that I had on track. And I probably had the hardest way about it to get around things, because in the sense of getting banned, and it frustrates me, but also like I've enjoyed pretty much every part of volleyball I've ever done, even when things haven't gone so right. So, and I think it's one of those things that pushed me to carry on after. Was I felt there was unfinished business. So you've done a good job, mate. Right.